What happens when a Las Vegas Reformed Jewish rabbi and a Las Vegas Presbyterian pastor have a conversation as friends? They discover that no matter where you live or what you believe, faith matters. In this episode of Faith Matters, Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian from Green Valley Presbyterian Church talk about wisdom versus knowledge and reflect on the wise people in their lives who have helped shape their spiritual journeys.
Adrian, good to be back.
Hey, it's good to be with you, Achi.
So listen,
for my Gentile friends, that means brother. My brother. Yeah.
My brother, my friend, which is really at the heart of what this podcast is about, is it not? About two friends from different faith traditions talking about matters of faith, simply because faith matters to both of us. So we thank our gentle listeners for tuning in, and hopefully we can provide a little bit of wisdom from our faith traditions, a little bit of perspective about how two people who agree to disagree, and sometimes they find things in terrific agreement. Whatever it is, we learn from each other.
And you just gave me a topic
What's
for a future
topic?
event.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, wisdom.
Wisdom.
What is wisdom? What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? We almost use the words interchangeably, but we'll come back to that.
Do you want to do that one today?
We can do that one today.
Oh, then you lead it.
So I was in a meeting the other day, and someone was sharing information. They were talking about a group of people who live in Samaria at Mount Gerizim in Israel, and they were sharing the information, and someone said, "Oh, you have so much wisdom." And maybe wanting to be the polite colleague said nothing, but I thought, that's not wisdom, that's knowledge. There's a difference between facts and wisdom, right?
That's true.
And so why do we use the words interchangeably, and what really is wisdom when we look at, for example, the writings in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures? So we look at Proverbs, we look at Psalm, the wisdom literature. What is wisdom? Why do we want to pursue a path of wisdom?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is what my mother used to say.
Oh, this has got to be good.
She used to say, I know what I know what I don't know, therefore I know everything. And she had, I loved your mother. I have three siblings, so my sisters and I were convinced for the longest time that my mother knew everything. But in addition to actually being a very knowledgeable woman, she was also a very wise woman. And so it leads us back to this whole question of wisdom and knowledge. You know, in Jewish tradition, we equate knowledge with Torah, traditionally.
Yes.
Torah is knowledge. And when you look at the Torah, which is literally the first 5 books of the Bible, and in Hebrew we'd call it Tanakh, and in Christianity they would call it the Old Testament, but Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, that's Torah, but it's also a word that means that it embraces all of Jewish wisdom and Jewish knowledge, and that you can, by studying the Torah, you can take yourself on a path of acquiring great knowledge, which hopefully will lead you to great wisdom. Not always, but that's the goal. So
and
that's the traditional Jewish perspective about knowledge and wisdom.
So the wisdom that we gain is through the study of Torah. It's through the study of Scriptures.
Right. Now this is, again, I'm a Reform rabbi. This is not to say people shouldn't go to school and learn about science and math and all kinds of what we call secular subjects. But when you're talking about knowledge and wisdom from a religious perspective, yes. And there is an interesting, we call it a midrash. Midrash is kind of, how can I explain this? Kind of rabbinic folklore that explains over the centuries Jewish tradition and knowledge and wisdom.
Could we use the word commentary?
Sometimes it's commentary, but these were actually more like little mini sermons.
Okay.
The midrash.
Okay.
And It was oral, and then eventually it was collected into bodies of work, which you can read right now. So without getting too technical, this is one of my favorite midrashim, which is the plural. The first word of the Bible or the Torah is Bereshit. And they do a play on words. Ba means with, and Reshit literally means wisdom. With wisdom, God created the heaven and the earth. And so they use that as a midrash to say that when God created the whole universe, he looked into the Torah, and it was like the architectural plans for the creation of the universe. And it's a beautiful midrash because it reminds us that we do live in a paradox, that there is a plan, a design for the world. We may not know what it is, but it's there. And yet free will is also given. And that's the paradox.
And that sense of wisdom. So with wisdom, God created the earth. God's looking, I'm trying to understand the Midrash. God's looking into Torah. So, but God spoke Torah into being, correct?
Well, in
So
Jewish tradition, when Moses goes up
Yes.
to Mount Sinai, he's going to present the Torah to Moses, right?
Yeah.
That would be the traditional point of view. But what the rabbis want to do is kind of create this midrash to say that there is a grand design and therefore a purpose for our lives. And there's another midrash, we could get really carried away, that there were actually worlds created before this world, and God was not satisfied. So he would create a world and say, oh my God, this did not turn out.
Kind of like when my son was playing with Legos. No, I don't
Exactly,
like this.
and
New
destroy it.
model. Yep.
And finally he creates this world. Of course, we had Noah and the flood. That disappears. But God makes that promise to say, you know what? That's it. I'm done. We're partners. I did my part. Now you, humanity, you're my partner. Now you do your part. And I won't destroy the world. It's up to you to maintain it. And please, God, don't destroy it either. Hopefully we have enough wisdom and knowledge.
Right.
Well, wisdom to guide our knowledge to protect our world.
I think that's so key. The wisdom guides our knowledge. We've all met people who have degree after degree after degree, intelligent, informed, highly educated, but sometimes they lack wisdom. We've met individuals, the paradox, we've met individuals who don't have the blessing you and I have had of an education, of graduate education, postgraduate education, and yet we look at them and go, one of the wisest persons I met. That wisdom doesn't necessarily mean I know facts and figures, but I know something about how to live a life, how to live life well, and for us as people of faith, since we're on Faith Matters, how to live a life that matters to God and a life that's pleasing to God.
Did you have anyone who entered your life who you felt was wise and their wisdom changed your life for the better?
Yes.
Who would that be?
So I think of one of the mentors in ministry. His name was Ed, and his just ability to come alongside me and to help me believe that God had actually given me gifts that I didn't recognize, but also to look at the example of his life and to see how a very successful engineer could make time for what we in our tradition call the spiritual disciplines, prayer, Bible study, going to worship services, how he managed to carve time out in his life for those activities.
So that was his example by the way he lived his life.
Yes.
Is there anything that he imparted to you verbally that stuck with you, that guided you? A piece of wisdom.
There was one moment when, this may not be where you're thinking, but there was a moment in life when we were debating, should we have 2 children, 3 children? We had had 2 very difficult pregnancies, and we were thinking about having a larger family. And I'll never forget him coming alongside me and saying, don't be greedy, be grateful for what God has given you. He always found the opportunity to be grateful.
And that resonated with
It
you and your wife at
resonated
that
with
time.
me
Yeah.
because we would not have thought about that in terms of should we have a larger family or not, but he spoke truth into our lives. He spoke wisdom into our lives.
Very, very nice. You know, wisdom comes from so many different sources, and I think the key is to be open to it. Sometimes it's from the usual suspects, right? Maybe it's a teacher or a clergy person or an elder in the family. But sometimes it can just come from someone who enters your life for but a moment, and you might never ever even see him again. But the fact that they were there, they were that angel in that one moment, and they changed your life. I wonder if our listeners can think of people like that in their life who have imparted wisdom and made all the difference in the world.
What about for you? I think they'd be curious, and I'm certainly curious.
You know, I guess mine is I was blessed with such great parents. I teased a little bit about my mother. My dad was a rabbi who was very respected and revered, except in the family we used to love to tease him because of his foibles. But before my dad died, he gave me a gift because he knew that I looked up to him. And he knew that in many ways I wanted to be, quote, as good a rabbi as him. And before he died, he said, you know, Sandy, you don't have to be me. You just have to be yourself. And I'll never forget that because I think that's true,
That's
not just
beautiful.
for me, but for everybody who has someone in their life that is, you know, very powerful that they wish they could be as good at or like or whatever. And the truth is God doesn't ask us to be like Moses. God just asks us to be ourselves and to live up to our own potential. And if we take that as our reason for being, to live up to our own potential, it's not only freeing, but it's also challenging. Because then the next question, of course, is, who am I? What am I? And how do I want to lead my life and also my career as a rabbi? So it was also a blessing, but also a challenge to me. And that wisdom has stayed with me really for much of my life.
He imparted wisdom, but he also gave you the blessing that so many people tragically have never received today. That blessing from a parent, that blessing from a parent figure that says, be who God made you, right? One of my favorite quotes, I think I've shared this with you before, is from St. Catherine of Siena. So we're talking medieval ages. And one of the lines from her literature is, be who God created you to be, and you will set the world on fire. That's
Beautiful.
a part
Beautiful.
of our path is discovering who God created us to be. And for Sandy, that's going to be different than for Adrian.
Right.
For Sandy, it was different than for your father.
And I think so often in life, people compare themselves to others, and we think, I'm not good enough, I'm not meant to be in this profession because I'll never be as smart as or as gifted as. And we each have our own special gifts, no matter who we are. And it's not to be, a big-headed person or to be a narcissist, but it's also to live a life of gratitude and the knowledge that we are created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And with that, it's a challenge to rise up to what it means to be created in the image of God. One of the common themes, as you've noticed, I return to in the podcast, because I think for many of our listeners, as we hope they understand that faith matters, one reason that faith matters is that it leads you to be a person of faith, and that you see the world through a person of faith, which then leads you to understand that as a human being, you are capable of the most beautiful things as a partner with God. And I hope that knowledge and wisdom come together for our listeners and for us, and that it takes us on a beautiful life journey.
Good words. Inspiring. Thank you.
I thank you. Another great time to converse, and I hope our listeners, get a little something out of it, and that they understand how important it is to let matters of faith touch their lives. And when they do, they'll understand as we do that truly faith matters. Shalom.
Shalom.
Faith Matters features Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation Yer Tamid and Reverend Adrian from Green Valley Presbyterian Church, and is produced by Leslie Snadowsky. We hope you join us again for our next podcast episode of Faith Matters.